because I understood how the service contracts work, Cisco would send you a brand new piece of networking equipment when you called in a faulty piece. They would do this in advance of receiving the faulty piece back. It was good faith. A lot of times when you have a network that is up and running, you're a financial institution, and this widget breaks, you need that replaced immediately. So I understood that, so I knew that I could get the equipment in, and then I would have a little bit of time to get the equipment back. When I was putting this together, and I wrote this in my book, I feel like I look like John Nash from A Beautiful Mind. I had Post-it notes all over my dining room table. I had my notebook open, taking just copious notes and just going, kind of in a sense, 1 + 1 = 2. I got this. And I felt at the time, and this I feel a little bit, I'm remorseful of this. It was very exciting to discover it. I wrote a line in my book that says, it was a treasure map that I had discovered that nobody else knew about. I also, simultaneously to that, the voice inside said, there's something not right with it. But the treasure outweighed that voice. And I put all the pieces together. I had to obtain the equipment, the routers and switches that required the service contracts. I had to come into possession of those. I had to purchase the service contracts. There was some back-end work that needed to be done, but it wasn't until I literally wrote that first service request requesting that new equipment, and I had to hit the send button. It was the equivalent of hitting enter, of hitting send. And when I did that, that's when it started everything. And I feel weird to say it, but it was exhilarating and filled with guilt all at the same time. In the beginning, I was trying to, it may sound ridiculous, make it as legit as possible. So I was trying to find genuine Cisco equipment on eBay to exchange like for like. When I realized that there would be, there wasn't always that equipment available, and B, there was a greater profit margin to be had to buy third-party equipment. So when that was readily available and I could send it back, I didn't think, and it's very foolish on my part, I didn't think that they were checking the return equipment as stringently as they were. Between the language that I continued to use when I would open up a service request, the duplicate language, the third-party equipment, there was just so many factors for them to pick up on. My understanding is from one of the FBI agents is that they were on to me. The fraud was committed for just under a year, I'd say about 11 months. They were on to me, I think 6 months into it. When the new parts would come in, I had different distributors who sold, they were not partners of Cisco Systems, they worked in I believe it's called the gray market. So they would acquire equipment and they would sell it to legitimate companies. And it's a completely legitimate business that they operate. It's well within the law. I found a few who were always willing to buy equipment from me. So I had this brand new equipment that I couldn't sell as new, unfortunately. The companies I was selling it to had to call it used. And I would sell it to them, they would, I forget, I think PayPal me the money. There was a couple different ways that I would receive the money in. And it honestly worked fairly well. There were times where not everybody needed what I had, and then I would try to branch out and find other vendors who had an interest. I would always try to find who's going to give me the best price, who's going to, what is my profit margin and how am I going to make the most. I rationalized what I did primarily through they're sending me a piece of equipment, I'm sending something back. Taking out of the equation that I was sending third-party equipment that wasn't legitimate, that I was doing this under a false name, a false company name and a false name. I removed all of that. I looked at it very black and white was my rationalization. It was 1 for 1. And I stuck by that. And I stuck by that for a very long time. And sticking by it did nothing for me and just caused more internal strife and losing trust within myself. Because every time I said it, I knew it was wrong. That voice inside, just my heart. There were times where my heart hurt. And that was just, but I would blow it off just with the rationalization and the black and white rationalization, one for one. I didn't actually think that they should check stuff. I didn't put it on them, nor did I think that they're this massive entity and this is not going to harm them. I didn't actually think of anything like that. I just really, if I remember, and I'm pretty sure about this, it was the one for one. That was it. It was, I can be very stubborn by nature, so I grabbed onto that one thing, that one, I hate to use this word, but this is what I refer to, this one truth that made everything that I was doing seem okay. If an employee is making, round numbers, just throwing numbers out, is making $200,000 a year based in sales, but they average $200,000 a year. And then as a manager, you notice that it's 175, 150, 125. That's, I think, when you have to step in to understand what's going on. Because when you're making $200,000, you're spending $200,000. I don't want to speak generally that everybody is doing this, but I think it's part of human nature. It's I forget the term, I think it might be hedonic adaptation, where we spend what we have and we get used to a certain level of living. And then the money starts going, the addiction's up here, but the money's down here. We've got a disparity, and that's a huge issue, and that is an opportunity and a need. Again, not everybody in that position is going to commit a crime, but that creates a situation where somebody is going to have to look for something to fill that gap. I think for humans, it's much easier to fill that gap as opposed to spend less money, which is the obvious choice. But once you get used to a certain bottle of wine, driving a certain car, living in a certain home, it's hard to give those things up. We think it's hard to give those things up. Having lost everything and rebuild, those things really don't matter. We need very little to live.